Hello, so today we're going to be asking ourselves, is Vayne broken? We're going to go into a little bit of a deep dive of this reroll comp, reroll slayers that is, and talk about the different items, the augments, and what your win conditions are for playing around this comp. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out as a TFT content creator. I do daily TFT guides, usually talking about how to play certain comps, traits, as well as different game mechanics. We're going to do a lot more of the game mechanics guides, like how to play reroll, how to play around certain situations in set 14. Those are going to come next week, but for now we're just going to do a deep dive into this comp. So Vayne reroll, why is it so strong? It's mostly because it caps out really high around many units that were buffed in the most recent patch. So typically when you're thinking about Vayne reroll, you're actually playing it as a Vanguard and Slayer comp. So how does that work out? Well, with the Slayers, you usually just play around 4 Slayers, which fits in really nicely that you're building your team around the Jarvan unit. Here I'll put Zed off to the side, but basically Jarvan is Slayer as well as a Vanguard unit. Vayne and Senna both Slayers as backline units. Vanguard we talked about a lot of times on this channel that has inter-team synergy with Anima Squad. So basically you can actually fit in a very nice and tight comp that works out to be 4 Vanguard in your front line and 4 Slayer, and it completes itself on level 7. What I mean by it completes itself is that all of your key synergies that you want for your front line and your back line are all fully maxed out once you hit level 7, which is really good for a reroll comp. Now, when I say it's a reroll comp, usually the units that you're trying to carry when you play this variation are Vayne as a 3-star, with the tank or primary tank being Jarvan as a 3-star. Additionally, if you can also hit Senna as a 3-star to be a dual carry, but usually Senna is going to hold some extra items. Now, this comp is extremely powerful for 2 or 3 reasons. Number 1, Vayne's really strong. We could get that out of the way. Number 2, Jarvan's broken. That's the main part. And number 3, because the comp completes itself really nicely on level 7, you actually don't have to push any levels beyond level 7 a lot of the times, and it can actually keep up with damage and tankiness with a lot of the other meta comps right now, so it's actually really efficient as a reroll line. You also have a lot of stability around the Vayne and the Jarvan because of how strong they are at their 2-star variations, in addition to being a 3-star's high cap potential. So when you're thinking about the units, let's go through items first, and then we'll talk about what makes the comp really strong and really broken. So with Vayne, Vayne is all about attack speed. If you read Vayne's ability, basically rapidly fire 3 attacks. The first 2 deal bonus true damage, and the final attacks deal whatever bonus true damage. The idea with Vayne is that you really want to get ramping attack speed, because with the auto attacks, it will actually scale her really well into the fight, and cause her to multiple cast her ult, as well as to fire these attacks a lot faster, which will then just pump out damage. You'll reach a point of critical mass where she's basically just melting enemy units very easily. Another reason that auto attacking works really well with Vayne is because she is a Slayer, and Slayer gives a bunch of AD, so the auto attacks actually get a lot of value off of having the vertical AD from Slayer. So typically you want to have a Guinsoo. If you're going for like the best case scenario, it's usually double Guinsoo on the Vayne. You're usually prioritizing double Guinsoo on Vayne if you can. 1 Guinsoo is enough to still play for a top 4. You're not going to like lose the game off of just having 1 Guinsoo, but if you're playing for your max cap and you're playing to like actually win out with this comp, you want to have the double Guinsoo. The last item is a little bit up for debate. So you might think to yourself, okay, I have a lot of AD, so maybe I want to play around like crit. Crit actually isn't that good on Vayne, so a lot of times you can put, like I said, depending on your spot and what your items are, I always recommend make items to make sure that you actually like win your rounds, because especially if you're playing a reroll, you want to win those early game rounds to make sure that you have the time to hit your units so you can actually convert your spot to a top 4. But typically you try not to put Infinity Edge on Vayne. It just doesn't synergize well with the fact that her attacks do true damage, so ideally you just want to put damage amp on her most of the time. So a better item typically is Giant Slayer. Giant Slayer looks really good in the stats, but I think that's just because there's a lot of reroll comps. A lot of boards have a lot of HP, especially with like a lot of the 5 costs just having a lot of base HP. So Giant Slayer actually works out really well because you get the proc of the 20 additional damage amp pretty easily, and it helps her to melt down units. Additionally, it gives a lot of attack damage and attack speed, both of which are stats that the Vayne wants to use in order to do really well. If you're looking for other damage amp items, there are other ones, of course. One item that isn't really damage amp but synergizes pretty well is the Runans. Now Runans is falling off of popularity because it's kind of like really tied towards the category 5 augment, which we'll talk about when we talk about augments that help out this board a lot. But Runans is also a really good item because if she's attacking or auto attacking a bunch, Runans kind of gives her more of like an AoE effect where she can basically spread the damage to other units. But if you're thinking about a good item to make on her that's really efficient for components, a lot of times it would be Giant Slayer. Of course, whatever third item you can manage, if you have the double Guinsu, your third item will be fine. Even like I said, like IE isn't that great or some other items aren't that great. Whatever you can muster out, whatever you can make will be fine. Now Senna, if you're carrying around Senna or if you're playing around Senna 3, then usually Senna doesn't want anything in terms of attack speed or casting. Senna just wants as much damage as possible. So a lot of times with Senna, you would actually put either your utility items because she has a little bit of a spread effect when she casts her ability. So, you know, you might want to put like your Last Whisper, or maybe like if you have a red buff, if you have like so many extra bows or so many extra components, you can put utility items on the Senna and she can work as like a dual carry or having hold on to the utility items. But if you're playing around Senna and you're trying to make her a secondary carry with as much damage as possible, you just want to stack her with damage amp and crit chance and as much raw, just one-shot potential as possible. So i.e. Guard Breaker, really good item pairing, as well Giant Slayer for similar reasons as the Vayne. You just want to take the AD that you get from Slayer and just absolutely try and melt down units. You don't necessarily need to put like a Guinsu or a Shojin on her. You could if you have those extra items, but typically you can just use those extra tears and rods to make Jarvan items. In terms of Jarvan, as much tank items as possible. Yes, he's a Slayer. Yes, it seems like you read his ability and he can do a lot of work. You don't want to build him like a melee style unit. You don't want to build him with BT, Titans, like that type of stuff. You want him to be a Giga Tank. Now, what they did is they kind of, in my opinion, they overbuffed Jarvan a little bit, and that's why this comp is becoming so ridiculously popular. Jarvan 3 is an absolute menace because of the shielding in addition to the amount of damage that he does. This unit just doesn't die. So this unit has so many things going for him. So first of all, this shield that scales off AP is massive. A lot of times if you look at a Jarvan will shield as much as most units will tank in the game. It is absurd how long this Jarvan can live, especially if you hit a Jarvan 3. Additionally, this Jarvan also deals a bunch of damage, so he does like if a fight lasts long enough, this Jarvan is really good at cleaning up, right? So in synergy with like the rest of your units that are trying to scale as long as possible, you have this unkillable Demon Lord that literally also does damage, and then on top of that, he also reduces armor. Now this armor is a flat armor reduction, so you can actually use the flat armor reduction. You should also still build Last Whisper. That doesn't mean that you don't want to build Sundering, so you usually want to make Even Shroud Last Whisper, but he also has flat armor reduction, which is really good for early game and also really good for late game. So unit just does everything, straight up just does everything. Additionally, if we're looking at the units from the synergies, you also get the 4 Vanguard, so he's going to have the Vanguard shielding as well, and durability from Vanguard, so that's really powerful. A lot of times I would just build him with as much HP as possible a lot of the time, so like a Warmogs would be really nice. Giga Tank items would be really good. Obviously, if you can muster out like the perfect Giga Tank items, that would be amazing. That's like Warmogs, Dragonclaw, Bramble Vest. Additionally, other items seem to be really good on him. Something like a Protector's Vow is just a really efficient use of items because you don't really want tiers for any of your backline units, but you can easily put them on the Jarvan. Additionally, this comp can also play around Zed. You can put any Slayer in until you find a Zed, but if you have a Z2, you can then build towards having Z2 with some extra melee items if you have them. This is extremely high roll and extremely high cap because a lot of times you're focusing on hitting your 3 stars that you're not really going to be prioritizing playing around Zed. But this works really well if you don't have Senna 3 and you have a Z2 instead. You can then transfer and put some more raw damage items on the Zed, and Zed can kind of work his thing and clean up the backline units and kill them off. So when you're rolling for this board, a lot of times it's a little bit difficult to figure out exactly where to roll, because if you look at it, there's Senna 3-star, which is a 3 cost, there's Jarvan 3-star, which is a 3 cost, and then there's Vayne 3-star, which is a 2 cost. Usually if you're rolling for a 3 cost unit, you want to roll on level 7 because the odds are just better to find the 3 cost units, and if you want to roll on level 6 if you're finding 2 cost units. So it's a little bit awkward to roll for. But what I would say is that it does depend on your spot. This is the key part about, like, you know, obviously rerolls, they're very like straightforward in that you just put in your team plan or you hit the units and it's very easy like in that regard. But something you have to think about critically whenever you play this comp is whether or not you're rolling on level 6 odds or level 7 odds, because on level 7 you can hit your max cap, which is a Jarvan and the Senna, and on level 6 you can hit the Vayne. What I will say is that this comp is very strong if you hit all the 3 stars. So here's just a rough stats thing. I don't want to bring up stats too much because I don't want to mislead anybody who's more casual or not really, like, you know, looking at stats websites that much. I have a how to read stats guide on this channel. You can check that out if you want to know more. But the comp is extremely strong if you hit all the 3 stars. If you fiddle around with it a little bit, a lot of the high cap placement, a lot of your win percentage and your giga high cap, like your giga average placement, comes from hitting the Jarvan 3. The Jarvan is the broken or the most broken part of this kit. And it really matters a lot because if you don't have a 3-star Jarvan, then you hurt your ability for your Vayne to ramp up with the Guinsoo's, because you really want to have that reliable front line that's going to absolutely melt everybody. So if possible, the greedy thing to do is just to roll on level 7. You'll find the Vaynes anyways a lot of the times, and rolling on level 7 gives you a better chance of hitting the Jarvan 3, which is your win condition. If you're trying to play for a first, you often want to roll on level 7 with this comp. However, if you are not very rich, if there's other people re-rolling 2 costs and you don't think that you can stably make it to level 7 and play around some of the other units that other people are having, you want to roll on level 6 for the Vayne. You kind of have to make that judgment call in the middle of the game. During your stage 3, you have to decide, am I going to roll here for Vayne and just hit Vayne 3 and then level to 7 and then spend the rest of my time just trying to pick up the Jarvans and the Sennas later? Or am I just going to level to 7 and hope that I hit the Vaynes on level 7 while I roll for Senna, Jarvan, and Vayne all together? There's no clear answer for it. What I would recommend, if you're new to the comp and you're having a little bit of struggles while playing it, it's definitely safer and easier to roll on level 6. If you roll on level 6, you could also go for Cane 3, but it is a bit of a waste of time. So if you don't hit it, or if you're not finding that many Canes, don't buy it. If you hit the Cane for free, go for it. Sorry, I say Cane, but it's Rost. You know, say, like, whatever, my bad. But Rost, if you're going for Rost 3, he's not that good of a tank, so don't think that you have Rost 3 and you'll be fine. You really need to hit your Jarvan 3 eventually, and you don't really want to push levels to 8 or 9. It's better to just stay on level 7 and just go for the Jarvan 3. But that is a possibility. You could go for this Rost 3-star. However, if you're really comfortable and you have a good understanding of how strong other people are and how strong you are relative to them, then I would recommend just rolling on 7, because you can have a good judgment of being able to figure out, hey, what do I need to stabilize here? Are my items good, etc. Like I said, if you're not comfortable in that regard and you're unsure, I would just play it safe, roll on level 6, hit your Vaynes, you'll collect some Sennas and Jarvans along the way, then when the next interval happens where you can easily go to level 7, go to level 7 later, and then hit everybody else. Enough said? I think enough said. Let's talk about some augments. So something that's really broken with this comp are the augments that you can hit, because there's actually a lot of them that really unlock a lot of potential with the comp. One of which is long distance pals. So long distance pals, for example, is extremely strong because basically what it does is your 2 units that are furthest apart share their armor, magic resist, and attack damage. You're already getting a lot of attack damage while playing this comp, so you can actually synergize with your Vayne and your Jarvan to give them both a huge amount of stats, because you're going to 3-star both of them, and you're already getting a lot of stats from Slayer, so they'll just get like an insane amount of AD. Scaling the AD really high on Vayne works out really nicely because Vayne is primarily going to be auto-attacking, and by auto-attacking a bunch, every single auto attack is going to scale off that AD really well. And then additionally, this Jarvan, if you just give this Jarvan a shit ton of AD as in addition to that, he's going to become like a pseudo frontline melee style tank where he's just going to absolutely do damage and delete units in his own right. So it's actually insane. Additionally, there's other augments that work really well. Similarly, it's like the anger issues for one. This is a comp where you can actually make good use of anger issues because you care so much about so many Guinsoo's, and a lot of your units are Slayers where they get a bunch of AD. They actually make great use of auto attacking. So triple Guinsoo on a Vayne will be really strong. If you see anger issues as a prismatic, you can also take that. Additionally, you have the Runan's augment. This is the one that I think started this comp, because this was like the first thing that people kind of figured out. It used to be like play Vayne if you see category 5. But the idea is that with Vayne, with the double Guinsoo and just like spreading damage really well, the Runans actually just like absolutely melts. A lot of times you only put one Runans. You still want to prioritize putting double Guinsoo if possible. So usually your priority is still double Guinsoo, but this can work out extremely well. Now, because you're dealing with a Guinsoo user, in addition to that, any of the augments that give your team a large amount of bulk also work really well with this comp. So for example, Spirit Link is another good option. Also like bulky buddies, cybernetic bulk, anything that makes your board really tanky is going to help you out a lot, because if you can sustain yourself and live for a really long time, like during a fight, like if the fight lasts a very long time, then your Guinsoo is eventually going to hit critical mass, and this Vayne is going to wipe out everybody that's left on the board. So if you can make it so that your front line just lives indefinitely, you'll actually cap really high within a fight, because your Guinsoos will basically just ramp up to a point where you just absolutely melt everything. So that's like the main ideas. Of course, rolling augments also help out. Starry Night, things like Prismatic Ticket, all of those can work really well. And then on top of it, there's also a Slayer dedicated augment. I forget where it is. Let me find it real fast. Lethal Rerouting, where Slayers above 50% health gain 20% attack damage, and while under 50% they gain 15% Omnifam. This is another one that's absolutely busted that you can also play around, because if you hit this, it not only gives you a Vayne, which helps you in your hitting of your 3 stars, you also get the opportunity to just like absolutely like, you know, cap out a lot higher. You just get 20 AD on your Vayne off rip, which is really useful because she's an auto attacker, and you also get like extra sustain for your front line, which is really nice, or your frontline Slayers at least. So you actually have a lot of value off of it. So the augments in general are very flexible, because basically all the tank augments are really good with this comp. There's a lot of the attack ones that are really good with this comp. And then additionally, like, you have specific scenarios that can help you in your itemizations as well as your high cap. Now, it is a very expensive board to hit Jarvan and Senna, so sometimes you might lose the game or get a bot 4 trying to find your Jarvan and your Sennas. I would recommend to play this comp when you have a good spot for it. This isn't a hard force out of nowhere unless you have like really good econ or really good rolling related augments. You should definitely play it if you have a good spot. A really good spot for this comp is hitting a lot of early copies of Vaynes, because if you just have like, you know, if you're stage 2 and you have a Vayne 2, for example, then it makes it very clear, like, I'm stable, I'm winning every fight, I'm gonna have a lot of HP, I can just push levels to 7 in order to efficiently roll for my Jarvans and my Sennas in order to cap out the board really high. And that's usually what you want to do. This is a comp where, if possible, you want to roll on level 7, but in doing so, you could grief your game, because if you don't hit your Vayne 3 early enough, then you just won't have the damage to compete with other boards, and you can easily die before you hit your Jarvan and your Senna. So that's the main air of caution, but I'm sure you guys have seen this lots. I'm sure most of you have even tried playing it. I would recommend this anytime that you see a lot of people re-rolling. If you have a spot for it, this is one of those comps where you just take it, and it's very reliable in getting a top 4, and it also has a really high cap, because if you hit your 3 stars, like if you hit Jarvan 3, there's actually a good chance you can get a first. It's a very hard board to deal with because of how strong this Jarvan is, how hard this Jarvan is to deal with. If you're looking for absolute max cap, obviously when you push levels, it would just be to play extra 5 costs, because they would be really strong. Additionally, you can also play around 6 Vanguard. If you have an emblem for either Vanguard or Slayer, you can play 6 Slayer or 6 Vanguard. I would recommend just playing the 5 cost. I don't think you need much more frontline, but typically speaking, if you have the option 6 Vanguard, or if you're forced into the option, 6 Vanguard is a little bit of a better option than 6 Slayer, because you just want more frontline to support the Guinsoos to ramp up, and the more frontline also helps the Jarvan to live longer, which is great. But anyways, that's it for today's video. Hopefully that was informative and fun and exciting. Of course, this was like a little bit of a one-off. I want to do a deep dive into the comp. Let me know if you like these type of deep dives. I'm trying my best to kind of balance these type of videos where I talk about the comps in specific, and then other videos where I talk about the traits or other game mechanics. So hopefully it's a good balance on the channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and see ya. Bye-bye.